My parents canceled my plane ticket and texted, "Have fun watching us leave, broke daughter." I laughed and wrote, "Safe travels." 10 days later when they returned, what they found waiting in the driveway made them freeze. It's almost funny how fast years of being the nice daughter can unravel into something so sharp you can't touch it anymore. I'm Laura, 28, and for most of my life, my role in the family has been quiet utility. Not the favorite, not the rebel, just the one they knew would always show up. You know the type. The one who gives up her weekend to help her mom reorganize the garage even though she's got a deadline. The one who picks up the check more times than she should because dad forgot his wallet. When my little brother crashed his car freshman year, I was the one who handed him the keys to my second vehicle. No questions asked. It was supposed to be temporary. That was 4 years ago. This trip, the vacation, was the one thing I had been looking forward to in months. The plan was set, all 5 of us to the Caribbean. Flights booked, hotel reserved, excursions prepaid. I was going through a tight financial stretch after some medical expenses wiped out my savings, and my parents had reassured me they'd handle the costs. I hadn't begged, they'd offered, and they reminded me often that it was what family does. The day before our flight I was packing. I still remember folding a swimsuit into my duffel when the family group chat buzzed. It was my dad. He sent a photo. 4 boarding passes. All in their names. Mine wasn't there. Then a message followed from my mom. "Have fun watching us leave, broke daughter." No winking face. No oh. Just that. I kept staring at it thinking maybe I was reading it wrong. But no. My brother added a follow-up. Something about bringing me back a cheap souvenir. I don't even remember what exactly. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before I typed what I knew would bother them the most. Safe travels. That was it. I left the chat. I didn't text again. I didn't cry. I didn't call a friend to vent. I just sat there for a long time in silence until my chest stopped buzzing. And then I stood up, grabbed my keys and drove to their house. They live in a cul-de-sac with well-trimmed hedges and a stupid little sign near the porch that says, "Family is everything." I pulled up and sure enough the house was dark. The driveway was empty. The Nissan, my Nissan, wasn't there. That meant they took it to the airport. They didn't know I still had a key. I opened the door and walked inside like it was any other day. Nothing smashed. Nothing stolen. Just me taking back what I had paid for. The antique stand mixer I bought for my mom last Christmas. Back in my trunk. The side table I gave them when I upgraded mine. Gone. The framed artwork I made in college that they said really completed the dining room. Back in my hands. I moved through the house slowly, precisely. But I wasn't done yet. I drove to the airport lot. It took 2 phone calls and a signed form at the front counter, but the Nissan was still legally mine. My name on the title. My insurance. I had to pay $124 to get it out of long-term parking. Worth it. I drove home with 2 cars that night. Parked them both outside my apartment. Sat on the curb for a while and just watched the street. I felt, not angry. Just done. 10 days passed. 10 whole days of silence from them. I didn't check their social media. I didn't check my texts. I went to work. I cooked meals. I took hot showers. I existed without them. Then the day they were scheduled to return I heard it. The group chat buzzed again. First my mom, "Where's the car?" Then my dad, "What the hell happened to our stuff?" I waited a few hours before replying. "You mean my car? And my stuff? You'll find it where it legally belongs." Then I turned off my phone. And waited for the real storm to hit. They got back late on a Sunday. I didn't need to ask. My friend Nate, who lives 2 doors down from them, sent me a blurry photo taken from his upstairs window. 4 figures standing in the driveway, luggage at their feet, just staring into the garage. The front door was wide open and there was this weird kind of stillness in the shot, like a movie frame right before everything explodes. I didn't reply. I just saved the photo. By Monday morning it started. My mom called me 5 times before 9 a.m. Left 3 voicemails. One of them was almost 2 minutes long and sounded like she was pacing. Then came the text. A full essay. Lines and lines of faux concern wrapped in outrage. How could I do this? Why would I stoop so low? What kind of daughter does something so deliberate and hurtful? Then she dropped the line that made me laugh out loud. "You stole from us and we raised you better than this." I replied once, "Everything I took was mine. I just took it back." Radio silence for half an hour. Then my dad texted, "We're calling the police." I didn't even flinch. "Please do." At this point I was prepared. I had a folder with receipts, registration, title papers, emails. Even screenshots of messages where they had admitted I'd bought those items. The blender, the table, even the car. Everything. All in my name. The cop showed up around 11. Nice guy, mid-40s. He barely asked 2 questions before he started nodding and flipping through the documents. I didn't even need to convince him. He could tell what this was. Family pettiness, misfired entitlement, and a daughter who finally got tired of being treated like a backup generator. No charges. No report. He left with a short good luck, and that was that. Or so I thought. That night I came home from work and the Nissan was gone. No broken glass. No signs of a tow. It was just missing. The spot was empty like it had never existed. I checked my messages. Nothing. I called my insurance. No tow activity. And then while I was scrolling Instagram, my brother's story popped up. A mirror selfie. In the driver's seat. Back with my baby. That car. My car. He had driven it away like it was some kind of family heirloom he'd earned. I didn't even bother texting them. I just pulled up the non-emergency police line and filed the report. This time they didn't get a friendly knock. A detective called my dad directly. Told him in very clear terms that the car was registered to me and that if it wasn't returned within 24 hours, they'd consider escalating the case. I didn't even know how that conversation went, but at 6:45 the next morning, the Nissan was back in my parking lot. Barely parked. One tire up on the curb. Glove box hanging open. My brother left a protein bar wrapper on the passenger seat and some hoodie that reeked like gym socks in the back. That same morning I drove straight to the dealership and sold it. They didn't even blink when I showed the title. The guy handed me just over $4,000 and wished me a good day. I took the money, walked straight to the bank and deposited every last cent into my account. That night I got a text from my mom. No hi, no, how are you? Just, you're still expected to help with the internet and water bills this month. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before replying. No, I'm not. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then nothing. The next week was quiet. Not silent, just quiet enough to make me wonder what they were planning. Because my parents don't just drop things. They circle. They plot. And when they finally show their faces again, it's never to apologize. It's to manipulate. And sure enough, the invitation came 5 days later. A message that said, "Come to dinner. We need to talk." I already knew how that night was going to end. I really thought that was going to be the end of it. After the dinner. After I said what I needed to say. After I walked out. I thought they'd go silent, maybe stew in it for a while and finally get the hint. But no. My parents don't do silence. They do guilt. They do pressure. They do control disguised as concern. 2 days later I started getting emails. Actual emails, not text. That's how I knew they were treating this like a negotiation. Subject lines like, "Let's be civil," "You're still family," and my personal favorite, "This isn't you." They were long, rambling essays about loyalty and family and how, no matter what happens, we'll always be your parents. My mom mentioned my childhood Christmases like that was supposed to erase everything they'd done in the last 2 weeks. My dad threw in a bit about how he'd always protected me, which to be clear had never happened. I ignored them. Until one of my mom's messages included something she clearly hadn't meant to send. It was copied from a message to her sister, my aunt. A full paragraph that started with, "We just need her to stop acting out. Once she realizes she's still cut off, she'll come back. She doesn't have anywhere else to go." She must have forgotten to delete it before pasting the rest. That sentence sat in my inbox like a dare. I didn't reply to them. I didn't even forward it to my aunt. I just sat with it for a few hours, drinking coffee and thinking about how small they still believed I was. How much they relied on the idea that I'd always come back, because I always had. But this time I didn't feel hurt. I felt calm. Focused. I pulled out a folder from the back of my closet, the one I hadn't looked at in over a year. Inside were the renovation contracts, signed agreements, receipts, and something a little more powerful. A usage rights agreement signed by my mother in early 2023. See, 2 years ago I had helped them convert their detached garage into a small guest unit. I paid for most of the work because my brother was still living in the main house, and they claimed they were short on funds. My mom, annoyed with me nagging about reimbursement, told me to write something up. So I did. A 10-year usage agreement, giving me full rights to sublet or use the unit as I saw fit. She signed it with barely a glance. And then they forgot all about it. Until I reminded them. I posted a listing that night. Rent was cheap, below market actually. I didn't want profit. I wanted presence. A tenant they couldn't ignore. Someone quiet, responsible, legally protected. My coworker Mia, freshly divorced, needed a place. She loved the idea. I told her everything. She agreed to be completely transparent, keep everything documented, and make sure there was no legal wiggle room for my parents to exploit. She moved in on a Saturday morning while they were at a neighborhood brunch. They came back to find a Subaru parked in the driveway and boxes stacked neatly on the garage porch. The next call I got was from my mom and I didn't answer. The next voicemail was a screaming rant about strangers on our property and violation of privacy. I didn't listen to the rest. Instead, I emailed her a copy of the agreement she had signed, highlighted the clause giving me full access and subletting rights, and CC'd a lawyer friend of mine, just in case they got creative. They did try. My dad called the police. Mia handled it like a pro. She showed them the lease, the documentation, the signed contract. My name, my rights. Everything was solid. The officers apologized and left. My parents stood in their own driveway, absolutely powerless, while someone else baked cookies in what they had assumed would always be their space. And the best part? That rent? Every month it hit my account right on time. 2 days later I got another email. This one was different. It was short. One line. "You've really disappointed us, Laura." I didn't answer. But just to make sure they understood the new dynamic, I had Mia put up a small garden flag in the front of the unit that said, "Tenant occupied, please respect privacy." Stayed up all summer. By the middle of August it was like they'd finally realized they weren't getting me back. But instead of shutting up and moving on, they escalated in the most predictable way, by pretending to take the high road while still trying to drag me under it. The family group chat came back to life like a bad sequel. They had re-added me without asking. First message. "We're not doing well financially. I hope that makes you happy." That came from my mom. No hello. No context. Just a passive-aggressive one-liner meant to flip the guilt switch. My dad followed with, "This used to be a family. Now it's just cold silence and contracts." My brother, who hadn't done a single useful thing since he'd crashed my car, wrote, "Hope your garage tenant's worth it." I didn't respond. I read everything. I screenshotted a few lines just in case they ever tried to twist things around again. But I said nothing. Not out of anger, out of total detachment. I didn't owe them a reaction. The next few days were a cycle of silence and jabs. Then the message that made me pause. "We're listing the house. We can't keep up with the bills. Hope you're proud of yourself." This one felt real. Desperate even. And yeah, I checked. Mia sent me a photo of the new for sale sign planted crookedly in the front yard. What they didn't seem to remember, or maybe didn't fully understand, was that the lease agreement I had them sign when I financed the garage apartment included a 10-year subletting clause that transferred with ownership. It was legal. It was airtight. It didn't matter who bought the house, the tenant stayed. So no, Mia wasn't going anywhere. And yes, they were selling a house with a built-in reminder of their failure parked in the backyard. A week later, one last dinner invitation came through. "Please join us. No expectations. Just one meal. We need to talk." I stared at that message for a long time. It was tempting to ignore it. But something in me, not curiosity, not sentiment, just this urge to finish things properly. So I went. I arrived 20 minutes late. The table was set like it was Thanksgiving. My mom lit candles. My dad poured wine. My brother sat there like a statue. For 10 minutes they made small talk, pretending we were all just catching up. Then finally my mom leaned forward and said, "We've made mistakes. But family fixes things." Then came the real ask. They said they were behind on several bills. That the mortgage had gone up. That they couldn't afford to pay both utilities and property taxes. That the buyer for the house backed out after seeing the lease. And then, "We're asking you to help. Just until things settle." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just told them the truth. "You don't actually want a relationship with me. You want access. You want control. You want me to feel guilty enough to fund your mess." My dad said I was being cruel. I said, "I'm being honest. You don't want a daughter. You want a lifeline." I didn't even get to finish before my mom stood up and said, "If you won't support your family, then maybe you shouldn't be part of it." So I stood too. "That's the first thing you've said tonight that makes sense." And I walked out. No door slam. No dramatic pause. Just a quiet exit from people who never really saw me as a person. Only a resource. That night I left the group chat again. And this time I didn't just exit. I blocked every one of them. Family in their world had always meant control. In mine it finally meant freedom. By the middle of August it was like they'd finally realized they weren't getting me back. But instead of shutting up and moving on, they escalated in the most predictable way, by pretending to take the high road while still trying to drag me under it. The family group chat came back to life like a bad sequel. They had re-added me without asking. First message. "We're not doing well financially. I hope that makes you happy." That came from my mom. No hello. No context. Just a passive-aggressive one-liner meant to flip the guilt switch. My dad followed with, "This used to be a family. Now it's just cold silence and contracts." My brother, who hadn't done a single useful thing since he'd crashed my car, wrote, "Hope your garage tenant's worth it." I didn't respond. I read everything. I screenshotted a few lines just in case they ever tried to twist things around again. But I said nothing. Not out of anger, out of total detachment. I didn't owe them a reaction. The next few days were a cycle of silence and jabs. Then the message that made me pause. We're listing the house. We can't keep up with the bills. Hope you're proud of yourself. This one felt real. Desperate even. And yeah, I checked. Mia sent me a photo of the new for sale sign planted crookedly in the front yard. What they didn't seem to remember, or maybe didn't fully understand, was that the lease agreement I had them sign when I financed the garage apartment included a 10-year subletting clause that transferred with ownership. It was legal. It was airtight. It didn't matter who bought the house, the tenant stayed. So no, Mia wasn't going anywhere. And yes, they were selling a house with a built-in reminder of their failure parked in the backyard. A week later, one last dinner invitation came through. Please join us. No expectations. Just one meal. We need to talk. I stared at that message for a long time. It was tempting to ignore it. But something in me, not curiosity, not sentiment, just this urge to finish things properly. So I went. I arrived 20 minutes late. The table was set like it was Thanksgiving. My mom lit candles. My dad poured wine. My brother sat there like a statue. For 10 minutes they made small talk, pretending we were all just catching up. Then finally my mom leaned forward and said, "We've made mistakes. But family fixes things." Then came the real ask. They said they were behind on several bills. That the mortgage had gone up. That they couldn't afford to pay both utilities and property taxes. That the buyer for the house backed out after seeing the lease. And then, "We're asking you to help. Just until things settle." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just told them the truth. You don't actually want a relationship with me. You want access. You want control. You want me to feel guilty enough to fund your mess. My dad said I was being cruel. I said, "I'm being honest. You don't want a daughter. You want a lifeline." I didn't even get to finish before my mom stood up and said, "If you won't support your family, then maybe you shouldn't be part of it." So I stood too. "That's the first thing you've said tonight that makes sense." And I walked out. No door slam. No dramatic pause. Just a quiet exit from people who never really saw me as a person. Only a resource. That night I left the group chat again. And this time I didn't just exit. I blocked every one of them. Family in their world had always meant control. In mine it finally meant freedom. 2 weeks passed in silence. No texts. No calls. No knocks at the door. After the last dinner, after I told them exactly what they were and left the house for good, I blocked their numbers, deleted the group chat and set my email filters to auto-archive anything with their names on it. I thought that would be the end. But then one night I got home from work and found a plain white envelope slid halfway under my apartment door. No stamp. No return address. Just my first name written in that overpracticed cursive my mom used to use for Christmas cards. I stood there staring at it like it was a trap. Inside was a letter. 3 pages. Handwritten. Neat. Manipulative in a way that was so practiced it almost felt sterile. She wrote about how things had gone too far, how this wasn't what family should be, and how she missed the old days. She mentioned how I used to sit on the kitchen counter while she cooked. How my dad once drove across town in a snowstorm to pick me up from a bad date. How family meant forgiveness. Then came the shift. She wrote that they were behind on property taxes. That the buyer for the house backed out after reviewing your ridiculous tenant agreement. That my father's blood pressure was rising and my brother was in a bad place emotionally, and that I was capable of helping. Then she wrote the sentence that reminded me exactly who she still was. "You're not hurting us. You're hurting yourself by turning your back on your blood." I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. I didn't tear it up. I didn't reply. I didn't even bring it inside. I left it in the building's lobby on top of the junk mail bin and walked upstairs. The next week Mia called. She said the house finally sold. Not to a neighbor or someone from town, but to a couple from Oregon. Newlyweds, young, low maintenance, already approved by the HOA. And yes, they accepted the garage lease without a single question. They even thanked her for how well she kept the space. The day after the sale closed, my parents packed up and left. No goodbye. No tantrum. They moved out before sunrise, according to Mia, loading the U-Haul in silence and driving away like the whole block owed them something. She texted me a photo the next morning. The porch was stripped bare. The family is everything sign was gone. The hedges were overgrown. The curtains in the front window were pulled shut like they didn't want the world to see what they'd become. And just like that, they were out of the neighborhood. Out of that house. Out of my life. I drove by later that week. Not for closure, not to gloat. Just to see it one last time. The new owners were already out front, replacing dead plants and unloading patio furniture. The vibe was different. Lighter. The house looked like it could finally breathe without my family suffocating it. I stayed in the car. Didn't need to go closer. There were no more letters. No more messages. Not through friends, not through relatives. I think they finally realized I was done. For real this time. Me. I started over. I got a new job, higher pay, better team, no one who saw me as the reliable fallback. I moved into a bigger place. I finally replaced the phone they used to call constantly. New number. No more voicemails I didn't want to hear. Mia eventually moved out when she bought her own house, and I leased the garage unit to a graduate student who prepaid 6 months and sends me muffins every time she bakes. That rent? It goes into a savings account I labeled, No Contact Fund. People ask me sometimes if I miss my family. I don't. I miss the idea of what they could have been but not the reality of what they were. They didn't raise a daughter. They raised someone to hold their mess, pay their debts and stay quiet about it. And when I finally set that weight down and walked away, they called it betrayal. But it wasn't betrayal. It was survival. And I survived. The update. Months passed. The house was long gone, my garage tenant was thriving, and the silence from my family held. I was starting to believe it was over. That I'd finally outrun the reach of people who only knew how to take. But then something showed up I hadn't expected. It started with a certified letter delivered to my new address, the one I never gave them. First I thought it was junk. The envelope looked generic. But the sender name caught my attention. Not my parents, not my brother. It was from their lawyer. Inside was a neatly worded legal notice. A petition for informal mediation. Apparently, my parents had listed me in some sort of estate update. Not because they wanted to leave me anything, but because they were trying to loop me into a property they had recently inherited from my late uncle. A lake cabin in Michigan. 1/3 interest. Me, my dad, and his sister. And here's the kicker. The taxes on the cabin were behind. Badly. The county was threatening a lien. And my name had been added, quietly, to the list of owners. No warning. No conversation. Just paperwork filed while I was still technically part of the family. They were trying to force me into responsibility for another mess. It was like a last-ditch legacy move. If they couldn't get me to support them outright, they'd try to tie me to their financial issues permanently. But they'd underestimated me again. I spent a few days researching. Contacted the county. Contacted a property attorney. Found out my signature had been used from a previous unrelated document. One I'd signed years ago related to helping with paperwork for my uncle's will. Technically not illegal. Definitely unethical. But there was a way out. I filed a disclaimer of interest. It legally removed me from any ownership or liability tied to that property. It was clean, official, and final. I even had it delivered to their lawyer's office in person. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. You've really made your choice. Don't expect to be included in anything moving forward. I didn't reply. But in my head I said, perfect. That was the last attempt. They finally understood that every door, every window, every escape hatch they thought they had, I had sealed it shut. A few months later, I heard through a cousin that my parents had moved again. Smaller place outside the city. Selling the cabin was still a mess. My brother was in debt. My dad's health had gotten worse. They were scrambling to keep things together without someone to lean on. I didn't feel joy hearing it. Just relief that it wasn't mine to carry anymore. No, my life is quiet. I have my space. My work. People I actually trust. A community that sees me as more than just someone who shows up when things fall apart. Sometimes I think about that first moment. The group chat photo of the plane tickets with my name missing. The laughing texts. The smug cruelty. And how they thought I'd be waiting there, heartbroken and grateful for scraps. Instead, I built something they can't touch. And that's how it ends. Not with revenge. Not with screaming. With freedom. The kind they'll never understand.